I'd like to welcome everybody back to part two with my good and great friend and legal idol, Jamie Owen here. And Jamie, we left it on a cliffhanger there. You are such a wealth of information.
Uh,
I wanted, because you're a student legal services attorney as well, and rather than
mhm,
tout our program, I would love to hear about what
mhm.
UCF, Student Legal Services, what you do there and what they do for the wonderful students there.
Okay, so if you're enrolled in classes and have paid the activity and service fee, which is the vast majority of students, you are entitled to our services for free. We don't pay, if you get a traffic ticket, I don't have any money to pay your traffic fine or your court fees or anything like that, but our services are free. So I do civil, which means that we do have an attorney that handles traffic and criminal, and that's all that Terry does. And then I handle on the civil side, and so that's everything from a consumer issue, like you're having an issue with a bill or something on your credit report that shouldn't be on there, to a lot of landlord tenant. That's about 1/3 of what we do is advise students. From everything from reviewing a lease before you sign it, which makes us very happy to do, or dealing with various issues that come up, to damages charges after you've moved out, which we're heading towards that season. So that'll be keeping us busy pretty soon.
Yep, the
Um,
security deposit disputes are going to start rolling in, right?
Yes, yes, they will. And not to do a shameless plug, but since the law is the same, we just did a presentation over on our YouTube channel, how to avoid ghost of leases past. That will kind of walk you through leaving a lease, if anybody's interested in that. Um,
I love the title. Thank you.
I
No,
tried.
and I love you, Jamie. I have to say this. It was your YouTube
Yeah.
channel, which I think
Mhm.
you're very instrumental in setting up
Uh-huh.
for your services. And it was your YouTube channel that inspired us, right, to set
Yeah.
up our YouTube channel. So thank you. In
Yeah.
fact, maybe I shamelessly stole the thanks for the
No,
attorneys,
no,
right?
no, it's okay. So yeah, it just, YouTube's a really good way for us to stream our presentations and then have them available for students to watch. And so that's how we have done since we've gone virtual, and it's turned out pretty well.
It's
Uh,
wonderful, isn't it? Anybody at that point, rather than having to do a presentation at a set time and,
mhm.
students in class or out of class, they can watch it at their
Yeah,
leisure,
at
right? They
their
can
leisure.
review it and yeah.
Exactly. And then, if there's something they're more interested in, they can come and, make an appointment. And then we do like name changes, uncontested divorces,
Oh, in fact,
simple
you and I, that's
wills.
how we met,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. So
It was a divorce case many, many years ago, Jamie,
yes,
which,
that would have been very shortly after
I,
we both started, I think.
yeah,
Layne and
I,
I have both been at our respective institutions for about 9 years, or just
9 years,
over
yeah,
nine
coming up
years
on a
now.
decade. Yep.
Yeah, so I had a student who had been married and separated from one of Layne's clients for a very long time, so we got them their
Jamie, I
divorce
always
done.
give you a shout out. You volunteer. Remember, because it's always like,
Uh,
am I going to do the paperwork? You're going to do the paperwork. And Jamie volunteered,
I think I
and
already had the paperwork basically
oh,
done
okay,
because I
yeah.
don't think we knew that he was a UF student, or maybe she did but didn't share that with me. So um,
Yeah.
so I
And
already had it done, so it's just ready to go.
no, it was great because I think at that point too, we started sharing and you've
Yes.
like with Terry, if I get a student that picks up,
Yeah.
gosh forbid, like they would ever get in trouble at one of the Universal
Mhm.
Parks or Disney, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Terry's
Yeah.
able to help out. You're able to help out Jamie
and
if I've got a
and
student
and that's
renting.
that's one of the great things about being in a university that has a student legal services program, is that if there's a partner university that also has one, um, in an area where you've had an issue, a lot of times, we've been very willing, and I know I have, to give someone some direction of what to do about their issue, that's here in Florida when they might be up at, somewhere else now, or um, different things like that. A lot of times we do get those sealing and expungements. Someone came here on spring break and had a little incident, and now they want to try to make sure that that's taken care of. We, can advise someone, and so that's really an additional benefit of our services. Most of the universities are willing to do that, and so we really help out. I just tell students, like, if you have an issue and you don't know where to go, reach out to us. If it's not us, because we don't do everything, we don't do personal injury, we don't do really complex stuff. Uh, we can usually point you in the right direction. Or there might be an office on campus that might better be
Yeah.
suited to help you deal with your issue, maybe in a non-legal way, that we can point you towards. And I'll circle back that that's one of the great things of being in a really large institution, is that there are a lot of services available to students. Being at a big state university, that there aren't necessarily at some of these smaller institutions. So
Jamie,
no,
have you found
great.
it out as well? Like a student will come in on, let's say, landlord-tenant maintenance issue or security deposit, and then you find out they're interested in the law, right?
Oh,
So you're able to
mhm,
give a little bit of guidance, you'd be a little bit of a
mhm.
mentor, right? Along those
Yeah.
lines.
Oh, yeah. Or someone comes in and, sometimes we'll get a student, and we won't necessarily know by what it is on the calendar, like if it's really a legal issue or not. But, you know, at the very least, even if it's not really a legal issue or really anything we could do with it, could be like, hey, do you know about X, Y, and Z, that this is available to you? Um, and a lot of times they're like, no, I never heard of that. And so it's very common for me. Now, I'm still virtual, which is why you have this lovely background.
Yeah,
um,
yeah. Thank you.
because UCF still has limits on how many people can be in our office at any
Yes,
one time.
absolutely.
It's very common for me to get off the phone with somebody and later that day, or maybe right afterwards, depending on what else I've got going on, to draft an email with like a huge list of links. Try this person. Um, you know, get if you don't um, hear something, and I have zero problem emailing somebody I know. I've been at the institution this long now. I usually know someone somehow connected to something on the non-academic side. I leave the professors as they are, but at least as far as services go, I have no problem emailing and trying to figure something out, for in this hypothetical situation, if I had somebody that maybe
Right, right. A lot of pro bono, right,
mhm,
as well for that.
I think and I think that's something that sometimes is discounted about being an attorney. If you're going to go work for a corporation, you're going to be representing corporate entities, or even like entities like UCF. I do not represent the university. I represent students. You
Right.
know, it's different. But if you're going to be in an area of law where you're representing individuals, I think it's underestimated how much of a social worker you are, and a therapist, and
Yes,
and
absolutely.
all of those things. That was one of the hard things, especially because I've always worked for, um, I think Layne and I were talking about this a little bit, before we started, was that I've always worked for either poor people or poverty adjacent people. I kind of consider students poverty adjacent, um, because a lot of you might be temporarily poor because you're 18 and in school,
You're
so
a
you don't
student.
have any of
Right,
your own
exactly. Limited,
resources.
yeah, limited means.
Or if you're a little bit older, or maybe you have a lot of family means, you're still in a position of someone who might not have a lot of power, and you're renting, and you're still put in a lot of that, um, adjacent position to a lot of those people. um, and sometimes then that means that you know um, usually a lot of people in those situations are putting out fires, or when I was dealing with persons with disabilities, a lot of times some of their disabilities, even if they didn't have a mental health issue, but then they were in a major car accident that made them physically disabled, though that probably led to a mental health issue.
Yeah.
So client management, how much you learn how to deal with people, ask the right thing, trust your gut. There's been times where I've just been like,
It,
I don't think this happened the way the person says that it happened. And 99 times out of 100, that turns out to be true, you know?
it,
And a lot of the legal field despite the fact that there's so many lawyers, I joke, if you throw a rock, you'll hit a lawyer in Florida. Market rate's really saturated. Not that there's enough attorneys to meet the legal need. It's just the practicalities of the issue, where there's a lot of people who are left in no man's land as far as accessing legal services. Um, it's a whole nother problem that I am not brilliant enough to solve. But your reputation is important. You don't want to stick your neck out for someone, or you know, you get burned. I mean, and it
Yeah.
happens, I negotiated this really good deal for someone and they promised me, that they were going to hold up their end of it
Follow
and they
through with
didn't.
it. Right.
And then, were then screaming at me upset because what happened. And it's like, well, this is exactly what I told you was going to happen. You didn't do what you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
And, um,
And
that,
Jamie, yeah,
that's how
you're
it is.
exactly right. Sometimes there's a lot of disappointment, and what you're talking
Hmm.
about, fighting an uphill battle, right?
Yeah.
In
Uh,
what we're doing. And
yeah.
you practice, which I really like. We used to call it holistic law,
Mhm.
but I may borrow a page from Dr. Mark Hyman if you
Mhm.
recognize that name at all. In the I was
Mhm.
going to say biohacking and functional medicine world. I
Mhm.
like the idea of functional law. In other words,
Mhm.
we look at the person, the whole person, where they're at, what you just mentioned, and that intersectionality.
Mhm.
Remember, everybody's different, and
Mhm.
you look. Sometimes the legal issue is a symptom of something bigger.
Oh,
Not sometimes, Jamie, almost
almost
all the time.
always,
Yeah, right, you
and
know?
so and sometimes it's simply lack of resources, and there's nothing
There,
that we can do to fix
yeah,
that.
yeah. If we had that magic Harry Potter wand, we could wave it, but
Oh,
we don't. Exactly.
if and someone was like, I'm not able to predict behavior, and I think one of these days I'm going to get a magic 8 ball for my office, because people always ask me, well, what's going to happen, and I'm always like, I don't know.
Right.
This is what makes legal and rational and financial sense, but especially like if I'm dealing with like a private landlord, or a non-corporate entity, just a person, it can be
But
really difficult to
exactly what
know.
you talked about. If somebody has failed to perform,
Mhm.
8 times in the past, and then like you said, you gave the advice, but you
Mhm.
you said, look, if you fail to perform, this is exactly what's going to happen, and you're probably telling them this several times to make sure
Yeah.
because they failed to perform before, right? So that
Yeah.
revolving door,
Yeah.
it's we have to look at
Mhm.
the issue is, which may be right
Yeah.
something much deeper with them to be
Yeah.
proactive, right, not reactive.
I think that's kind of the twofold question. So, I never like someone to leave my office with nothing. And sometimes when they come in and it's not really a legal issue, for example, someone sent me the other day a student who was over the age of 18 to talk about emancipation.
Yeah, we get that too.
Well, at 18, you're legally
We're
emancipated. There is
kind
no
of
legal
emancipated anyway, right?
emancipation.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
but it had to do with financial tuition dollars, and I happened to be going to a
Yeah, that's
session,
usually when it arises.
in a couple weeks, and I was like, well, if I find out anything from that, I'll let you know. And I didn't, so I actually ended up emailing them. But then, like, I tried to connect them with, like, the student was a Black student, and then they didn't even know that there was, you know. The Multicultural Academic Services Center on campus, where they could get connected with some extra resources and potential help for that. And so, I connected
Good.
them with that. And then I looked up a couple other things that I could direct them to that might have been helpful, because they were kind of ending their studies, and there's some other resources that might be available to help them kind of get past the finish line.
Yeah.
Um, so, I try to not leave them with that. But then, we have the students, and I'm sure you guys do too. And I had this in legal aid that are the frequent flyers.
Yes. Yeah,
You
that's a
know, when you
right.
find someone who, continuously ends up in this, well, I've had the same situation basically over and over again, but then also like related situations. um, usually they think that they're savvier and they're going to beat the system, and that never happens that way. And sometimes I had to been like, look, you've been in my office for like, this is like the third time now about, you know
Yeah.
what's the common denominator?
There
And
we go.
you
Yeah,
know
exactly. That inward reflection or epiphany you want them to have, right?
yeah, some, and it's hard to say that to somebody, like,
And,
because I care about the student. Like, I'm not here doing this work because I don't care about my clients.
and
I'm here doing this work because I care about my clients.
do you find
Um,
yourself, like for counseling, a lot of times we refer our students,
mhm,
counseling and wellness or Gator Well, we call it here,
yeah,
the external services because exactly
yeah.
what we talked about, Jamie. I want to give you a quick story, just very quickly,
Mhm,
and I will, I want to hear from you, but, I've had quite a few students that have had significant, well, they use a lot of marijuana, right? They just
mhm,
smoke a lot of weed.
mhm,
And, they come in, they get caught with it, on campus, one reason or another. And, so I remember I've had a few students that have got it twice, right?
mhm.
Criminally charged. And I said I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you, how often you use. And one of the students told me, oh, not much, Layne, a couple of times a day. I'm like, well,
And you're like,
if you have to get stoked going to class and then stoked,
uh,
when you get home.
and then I'm like, do you not smell it? Like, I remember I was walking um, one time when before we moved to the union, so a while ago now, and I was walking behind this kid going to the parking garage on this very well traveled path, and I'm like, it has a very distinct smell, both smoked and unsmoked, and I'm just like, dude,
Yeah, yeah,
if you encountered one of our police officers on campus, and our police officers are probably a little bit more even-handed than some of our other community organizations here. Um, I will
I
give our police officers a shout out that sometimes they could criminally charge people, and they choose not to. They put
right,
them through student conduct, and there's probably some debate about whether or not that's better or not.
right,
Um,
right, exactly.
but
Jamie, I was
yeah,
going to say, when we finish up here, when we break, I'm going to
yeah.
tell you a little secret about the police dogs, which I know everyone's going to ask me after they watch the
Yes,
video.
and then, they could have a dog there, or they could smell it themselves. Like, I am not someone who regularly partakes. And, I don't have a medical card. Um, I think everything else is outside the statute of limitations. So, I mean,
Right.
in college, I certainly, um,
Well, my same
but
thing. No judgment here in regards of the
yeah,
but it's the what I think is identifying the deeper
yeah,
issue sometimes
yeah,
and
and
usage rates. And
yeah,
I always tell them that it's not us. If you want to get the laws changed, it's the legislature, right? Or you can
yes,
vote it in, which has been
yes. Well,
done here, and we may be moving toward that. Oh,
I think they knocked the amendment down,
did they
so
knock the amendment
it will
down?
not be on the ballot,
Oh,
as
okay.
it stands in 2022. They said it was not specific enough, or didn't mention that it would still be federally a crime.
Oh, gotcha. Was
So yes.
it wasn't one of those multi-plank. You can never understand the wording of this. I don't know. It's always seems it's very legalese and
Yeah,
confusing
so
for lawyers.
so when you guys are looking at the amendments and you're going, what the heck does this
Yeah,
do, and
I
what's
agree
put
with
on
this
there?
portion, but not this one. But
Yeah,
yeah,
same. I look at the amendments and I'm going, what the heck does this say?
right.
So exactly. Don't think
It,
that sometimes because we're a lawyer, we have
I
sometimes stuff's Greek to us too.
I used to give a shout out to League of Women Voters,
Hmm.
and which maybe changed the name. I can't remember recently, but the reason, and it's not a political view, but they put together a very nice workbook and put it into plain English. Who's behind, the
Hmm.
various things, so it was much more transparent, right?
Hmm. I've
So
used them before. They're
yeah,
nonpartisan.
nonpartisan.
Um,
They are
oh,
not partisan. I should
yeah.
say that. Yeah,
But yeah, and it can be um, really difficult to figure out those things. But yeah, I mean, eventually, if you do it so often, the odds are eventually you're going to get caught. You
it's
can only do something so many times and get every time the risk goes up.
Exactly. That's what I tell a lot of my students are pretty honest to me. They're like, Layne, I'm going to play the odds in Gainesville. And I'm like, well, as an attorney, I just ask you to follow the law and know the legal consequences, too. In Gainesville now, with the number of law enforcement that we have for the students' safety, which, based on some past,
Mhm.
things that have happened, it's primarily to protect the students, but part and parcel, they're also, in the crosshairs, so to speak, right? Sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had some here in so UCF spans several counties. We have a lot of branch campuses, but we also are right on the border between two counties, like literally on the county line. So at least in Orange County in Orlando, they've given them the option to do an ordinance violation and a civil ticket. Um,
Oh,
so some of our officers do
good.
that for marijuana possession, but
Yeah, and
it's a crapshoot.
it's a crapshoot. Yeah, exactly right. And can be here too, Jamie. Thank you for sharing
Mhm.
that. What's it? Is it that I always forget the name of that? Is it okay to name that place that Terry and you were showing us when we went off campus nights? Something where all the students go
Oh,
and
Knight's
party.
Pub maybe, or Knight's Library. We have
Library, because you could. They always tell their parents, "I'm going to the library." Is that right?
oh, maybe. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and I'm sure so Orlando's a little bit different, and I never went to a school in a college town, and so I know that like Gainesville can be a little bit different, that everything kind of revolves either around
Sure. Yeah.
Shands or
Sanitation, UF. Exactly. Yeah.
UF, but we still have college bars. So those are still, they're really close to campus and they're the places that they know students are going to go. And so they set up stings
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
people get busted every time.
All
And
the
it's like,
time. Fake IDs,
and
right?
and a lot of times they tell you they're going to do it. Like, ahead of time,
Yeah.
that UCFPD will put out on their social media that this weekend we're going to be doing a
Special
DUI.
detail, right?
Yeah, DUI patrol on Alafaya Boulevard, which is the main road that runs down the west side of campus. And I hope I got that right, west side of campus. And, and people get busted every time. And, I don't judge anybody there, but for the grace of God go I.
Yeah, of course,
I've
of
made
course.
bad decisions.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You
We've we've
know,
we've all been there, and that's one thing I want to do a shout out to, Jamie. I've had people that have, rescued or helped me or assisted me, over the years,
yeah,
and it's wonderful to have that. I
yeah.
do a quick segue. Organizations
Okay.
you belong to or recommend, Jamie?
I actually don't belong to any organizations
I love it.
currently.
Oh gosh, I so want to be there.
Um, I,
I'm behind on my dues, I'm sure, with the EJCBA
yeah.
and Factal.
So I don't impart because they can be very expensive. A lot of these legal. I mean, I'm a member of the Florida Bar, and I'm
Of
a
course,
member
as you
of
have to.
the Middle District of
Middle
Central
District.
Florida, or Middle District of Florida, U.S. Court, Central Florida, Middle District. That and so I keep up with my dues. They just redid their system, so I don't even have a login for the Middle District currently. I gotta fix that. But
Oh, Pacer. Yeah.
yeah, you didn't used to have a pacer account, now you do, and everything has to be linked, and it just gets really complicated. The legal profession is totally behind on anything electronic, so everything just gets to be way more complicated than it needs to be.
Yeah.
I was a member of the National Consumer Lawyers, or National Association of Consumer Advocates, NACA. Um,
Oh, you
at one
remember our group though, Student Legal Services.
Well, yeah, I am. I'm not a paying dues paying member, but I
Well,
am a member.
I'm not sure we have to be except for our conferences, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But and
So
that's
yeah,
under remind me what that's under.
National Legal Aid and Defenders Association. So
NLADA. That's right.
yes.
Thank you.
So yeah, I am an active member of our Student Legal Services section.
Very
Um,
active, maybe the most. Yeah.
I don't think I'm most active.
I don't know. You're
I'll leave it
yeah,
to
it's way up there.
I'm sure. Um,
A good advocate.
But you know, um, I've been a member of the Central Florida Women's Lawyers Association at one time, um, but it just was like really because we're not in downtown Orlando, and work at the campus, and there's just like so much stuff I have to do for that. It can be kind of difficult to also participate in a lot of the other stuff. I also don't live where I work, so I have a very long commute.
How long is
So
your commute, Jamie?
um, currently, because there is a lot of construction going on. If well, I haven't been commuting because I'm still remote, but
Right.
it can be anywhere. In the mornings, it's a little over an hour. Used to be 45 minutes before the construction started, but it's a little bit over an hour. In the evenings, it's an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Wow, Orlando traffic, right?
Yes, and then construction.
And construction.
So
Wow.
they basically are making a whole north and south bypass around Orlando with toll roads. So the south arm is already in existence, and there was a westerly arm. So they're bringing that westerly arm now along the north side, um, and
Wow.
connecting that back to the other arm. Um,
It
so once that's all done, actually my commute will actually be easier but expensive because tolls are expensive. If Florida has the most toll roads, I think. It's an epidemic here in Florida. Um,
it
but
it truly
but
is, especially for,
yes.
I was going to say,
Mhm.
your group, right? Your
Yeah.
cohort comrades there.
So yeah, all of us, Orlando is really a lot of toll roads. So yeah, they're doing that. So it's just
What
um, crazy construction, lots and lots of people. Roads didn't keep
expensive
up
real
with.
estate,
Yeah,
a lot of terms
roads
that we, yeah, welcome.
infrastructure didn't keep up with the way Florida has grown. So I was born here in Florida in the mid 80s, and I recently looked, and I think the population has doubled in Florida since I was born.
And
So like,
Orlando, probably much more than that too,
oh,
right?
probably.
Area, yeah, Orlando,
Um,
Kissimmee, that whole.
but yeah, and I kind of was thinking because, the pandemic is like, oh, I'd love to get outside. But, there's nowhere to get outside here where there's not necessarily tons of people. It's not like, if I go out west and you go to a national park or something where there or a state park, you might run into some people while you're hiking or whatever, but you still have space. But if you go on any of the running trails and stuff here, there's just a lot of people.
Jamie, you are always welcome to come up here to Gainesville, and we will give you the red carpet. Hey, we
Oh,
visited you guys down in
I
Orlando.
know. I've been to Paynes Prairie. That's up
Paynes
near
Prairie
your,
is very, very
yeah.
pretty. Yeah, exactly
Um,
right. And we have even more, a lot of nice trails and
yeah.
biking.
I guess maybe I'll have to make it up
Yeah,
there on another toll road on the
on
turnpike.
another toll road.
But
What,
yeah,
Jamie? I know we've been talking about traffic, toll roads.
yes,
Not to interrupt you, but
that's okay.
you've named so many hardships you've already been through.
Yes.
What has been the hardest hardship in law for you?
Um, oh.
Are there too many?
Uh, well, there's two, and I think we already talked about the one is the financial burden.
Yeah.
Um, it just costs a lot
It
in opportunity cost. Um,
it's a good point,
mhm.
Jamie. I think I maybe had shared this with you, off camera, but I feel like I'm losing our doctors,
Yeah,
lawyers. It's so expensive now to go to medical school, law school,
yeah,
name whatever school for grad
yeah.
school,
Hmm.
and to actually, be in public interest, right, or public
Yes,
service. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's definitely a
you have to be
totally different.
wealthy in order to do
Yeah,
that, right?
or
Almost
or be really smart and be able to get a lot of scholarships,
very
um, a-
frugal, like yeah.
and yeah, and leverage that. But yeah, it's very expensive, and a lot of times, even if you want to go public interest, like I was saying earlier, it's not like a first step, especially if you're really into advocating and you like these national organizations that advocate for certain things. They're not taking fresh green attorneys right out of law school. You're going to have to put in your dues somewhere else. um,
Jamie, you're going to be my lawyer because you articulate everything
so
so incredibly perfectly. I think every time
I
I
guess
aspire to be like you.
oh, you
I
laying it on.
interrupted your second hardship. What was your second
Yeah,
hardship?
laying it on thick, Layne.
Yeah.
So one of the things I want to talk about, if we're we're talking about the legal profession and being an attorney, is mental health struggles.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Big one.
and I guess I'll put a little bit of a content warning here that I am going to be talking about um, addiction and suicide rates and stuff like that. So you could skip over this section if those things are triggering for you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Um,
Telling us.
yeah, this profession. I'll talk about what I've experienced, and I'll talk about a little bit more of what the profession experiences. So you go to law school when you're 22, and for a lot of us, we've been at the top of our game. We did really well on the SAT. We went to school. We do really well in undergrad, and then you go into law school, and it's a struggle. And you're also going all through a lot of different things developmentally, and kind of being on your own. And doing different things, and maybe if you're like me, you're losing family members because they're just at that age. And so there was just like a lot of things going on. And um, I never really had to confront the fact that I had anxiety and depression before then in the same way. It kind of, law school is a hammer, and it'll find every fault. And so is this profession. This profession will, it really can weigh on you if you're a perfectionist. Sometimes it's hard to know when to stop, especially now with computers and being able to look up cases. And how do you know when you've researched enough, and did you do enough for your client? And
Yeah.
did you go to every ends? Did you burn enough midnight oil? Are you doing everything you're supposed to do?
Exactly.
um,
Yeah.
and then, like, are you being empathetic enough? Are you taking on their issue enough? Are you handling it enough for them? Have you contacted them enough times? Every time you contact them, it's an hour of them, crying on the phone to you. But are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And I I really struggled with it. And I still struggle with I ended up um, did some did some therapy in law school. I'll have some I have some critiques of what happened then, but that's a different presentation. And then my first job was it was a lot. I had 125 open case files. As a new attorney, they wanted to do a class action. It was all of these things, and it just was really overwhelming. And I ended up in crisis. And had to do some very intense therapy for a while. Fortunately, I was able to recognize that I needed it before, um, it was that bad. But there's that. And then a lot of times in this profession, you need to have a coping skill. And a lot of times, there's good and there's bad things with that. So, in my law school, it was like drinking. So every event you go to, there that's sponsored by the law school, there's beer and wine free,
Yeah.
because everybody assumes you're 21, and you
Right.
are. Most people are,
Right.
at least 21.
Right.
And then, especially since Northwestern doesn't take a lot of new grads, they like people who, at least at that time, had worked for a little bit, which I think is really actually a really good thing. Um, and then, there's bar review, which is like Thursday nights, where the Student Bar Association negotiates with a bar to offer discounted drinks.
Right.
Um, and then,
Or
it's
sometimes
every
they have just an open bar, right?
Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you pay to get in or whatever, and then
Right.
you get whatever. Um, and then, when you go to law firm sponsored events, there's wine. Um, uh, you know, uh, and there's just a lot of things. I never struggled with alcohol, fortunately, but um, that is a big problem in the profession. Is
Yeah,
that
it is. Yeah, we've
um,
seen it left and right.
mhm. Addiction is a huge problem in the profession. So in the profession, when do you go to a bar event or a different thing where there isn't a bar? you don't go to a conference where there isn't a bar. Sometimes it's an open bar, sometimes it's cash bar, but there's a bar there, and there's nothing wrong. I enjoy a good cocktail from time to time, a good glass of wine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, um, when does it become destructive? Another thing, and this is one of the things that I did was, like you were saying with Chicago, running's a big thing, and exercise and diet. And for some people, that's a good thing and you get a lot of positive feedback for. But for some people, that can be um, not good. And for me, it was not good. And I think you've known me, you probably have seen me at a lot of different um, body sizes over the years. And um, disordered eating was something perhaps I engaged in for a while because it was a way to have control.
Jamie,
Uh,
you and I know they call them comfort foods for a reason,
yeah,
right? And
and
we do get
yeah,
a dopamine release and everything.
mhm.
It makes us feel better, right?
Yeah. I'm not a binge eater, so to speak, but I definitely for a while went into a period where I ran half marathons, and which is there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good, thing if that's something you enjoy to do. Movement is a good thing. It's just when you ruthlessly exercise control over some aspect of yourself because it's something you can control and maybe not anything else is controllable. Um, and,
Jamie,
and yeah.
yeah, and I think what we were talking about
Mhm.
before, you're a practical, pragmatic person,
Yes.
and I think being a little bit OCD is great for a lawyer, right? Because it
Oh,
keeps you on target, on task. But like you said,
yeah.
anything you turn your attention toward, you are. Some people would say
Yes.
overdoing it, but you want to get it right, right? We're
Yes.
perfectionists by nature.
Oh,
Is that fair to
exactly.
say?
And sometimes, in this profession, a lot of times there's things that are totally out of your control. You don't, I mean, I can be in front of a judge. Um, so I'll use an example. I was in front of a judge for many name changes, like 2 or 3 name changes. And then the last one I did, for no reason, um, it's not required by statute, but she wanted the birth certificate, a copy of the birth certificate filed for before she would grant a name change. And
That's
so
yeah.
it's like you
And
couldn't get,
with
she at least took testimony and just admitted it conditional upon us filing that. But it's like, but I've been in front of you many different times, Your Honor, and this is coming out of left
And then
field. And
suddenly, yeah, coming,
yeah,
right, a change on you. Oh, you asked for consistency in the law,
yes,
right? And
yes,
I think as attorneys, we really fight for that because we want
hmm,
everybody to be treated equally and civilly,
yeah,
right?
yeah, and
With
and
respect.
and that can be one of the frustrating things. If you practice in different counties or in front of different judges a lot, and we're not in court all the time. It's just not the nature of our practice to be in court all the time. Um, and we do practice, in technically in several different counties, but mostly in 2 different ones. We're primarily in those two. Um, it just totally different way they want stuff filed, totally different way. Like in Orange, I just email the proposed order to the JA, and Seminole, I have to do it through the system.
Yeah, I
It's just all
know.
those different
I
things.
know.
Um,
And you got to know
and
your judge too, like you said,
oh,
right?
you gotta know
You
your
know,
judge. Um,
the
it,
courthouse, the particular, decorum,
yeah,
and yeah, different
yeah.
place to place.
Oh yeah, and when I used to practice in some of our more rural counties, I used to kind of play up the accent a little bit because, um, and I would appear in person. I would make a point to drive all the way to Palatka to
Right.
appear in Putnam County Court in person, which is not necessarily what my opposing counsel was doing, and judges appreciated that because not a ton of attorneys necessarily want to go to Palatka. Um, so
It's
it's nice. It's right there on St. John's River,
Oh, it's so funny, Jamie. You're reminding me, when I get together with my relatives from Vermont, maybe my speech becomes slightly more clipped,
Yes.
and things. And it's that
Hmm.
chameleon, though, the
Yeah.
ability, right,
You
to
know,
to
y-
prepare and to adjust.
yeah, and that's definitely something that you need a lot of people skills, and that I'll circle. the mental health issue and coping skills, if you're going to go to law school, you got to develop a good, strong support system. You need to have good coping skills, and they need to be, you know, like I said, there's nothing wrong with going out and, going out and having a good dinner, and that's a form of self-care, and maybe having a couple of cocktails. It's a problem when you're doing it every night. Um,
Yeah.
you know, there's nothing wrong with exercise and diet. It's a problem when it consumes a lot of what you're doing and you don't have a lot of flexibility. If your routine gets off, you're not able to exercise that day, it really throws you for a loop. That's when it becomes a problem. So you got to have a good coping skill, whatever that might be. What do you do to do your mental health? Like skincare, I know, is a big one that has makes us around, and it's fine to have a great skincare routine. It's a problem when you buy every single thing that comes out on the market. So that's kind of where you're at with that. And then you gotta have some soft skills, I think, too. Like, you have to know how to manage your clients, you have to know how to read the room. There's some things like that, and that's why sometimes I will really encourage students who come to me, who, especially young students who maybe haven't worked a lot before, haven't really had a job. I encourage them to maybe consider working for a few years before they go to law school. There's a program down in South Florida where sometimes they basically come in as juniors. So they're only at UCF a couple years, which means they're graduating at 19, 20. And then, they're looking at going in law school. And I'm like, you need a little bit of seasoning. Um, and
Exactly.
and I will tell you, there have been lots of experiences that I've had outside of the profession, including I briefly worked for a cable company. Believe it or not, that has come into handy while practicing. I was able to speak, talk the language of the cable company for this particular incident that happened, where a student was being blamed for um, the cable box when it belonged to the apartment complex through a apartment complex wide account. It's called a bulk account. And different things like that comes in handy. And you just get some seasoning and some soft skills that you just won't get in any classroom. You won't get in any internship. You go out and have a career. And pre-pandemic, I would say, if you always wanted to go out and work for Disney World, go work for Disney. If you always wanted to save the whales, go work for some sort of um, planet saving fun.
I,
you know, do that for a couple years, and one, you'll make connections if that's what you want to do once you go to law school. You know, knowing people is such a huge
Thank you,
advantage.
Jamie. Yeah, opening up those doors. I'm going to stop for just 1 minute. We're going to do
Yeah.
a part three, okay?
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you why. I'm running low on storage. I have to delete a file here, and I'll come right back.